The year is 1997. South Park is making waves on TV. Bill Clinton starts his second term as US President. IBM's Deep Blue defeats Garry Kasparov in chess. And in Italy, disturbing events are taking place. A child, Child Zero, is taken away by social workers and entrusted to the Franciscan cenacle. Months later, the child is returned to the parents, although this would not be for long. The child would make shocking accusations against the family, and in May of that year, the father and older brother were arrested on charges of. The accusations included physical violence and the making of films involving other people and children. Said films were never found. Over the years, more children would be separated from their families in a similar fashion, and all would make the same accusations. That their parents were part of a satanic sect that not only indulged in but murdered children as well. The cult, supposedly led by the village priest, were accused of committing their acts in their homes and in cemeteries during the night. In the end, 16 children between the ages of 1 and 12 were taken from their families, following 5 separate court trials. 15 convictions were made based on the children's disturbing accusations. However, not everyone was convinced that these families were child-abusing cultists. Pablo Trincia, an Italian investigative journalist, would delve into this conspiracy in an attempt to prove that no such events ever took place. Pablo Trincia's theory was simple yet horrifying. The social workers that had taken the children had, using psychologists during interrogations, manipulated the children and created a collective false memory. After subsequent interviews, the children amended their stories with new, disturbing details, making the events more and more outlandish. Many of these details were implanted and suggested by the interviewers, not the children. Pablo Trincia revealed this in the now infamous Veleno, Poison in English, podcast, as well as an article in the newspaper La Repubblica. The story was made into a multi-part documentary series on Amazon Prime. Of the 15 people convicted, 8 people were acquitted or absolved due to lack of proof. However, even those who were acquitted were not reunited with their children. Don Giorgio, the priest accused of running the satanic cult, died of a heart attack before his trial could take place. A mother of one of the children, unable to bear the hideous accusations against her and the loss of her child, threw herself from a window before her trial. One of the children, called Sonia, was taken from her family because she was the victim of. However, she was the only child who never explicitly said if something actually happened or not. Instead, her mother was forced to say that the violence might have happened, although she was unsure. After making this statement, she was permitted to see her child again after 3 years. Her daughter wouldn't look at her, appealing to the social workers around her like she wasn't sure what she could and couldn't say to her mother. With the help of a private investigator, the mother eventually found out that her daughter had been adopted by the social worker's lawyer. During the trial, recordings of the children's interviews were not presented as evidence. Instead, testimonies by social workers were presented as evidence instead. This was likely done to obfuscate the manner in which the interviews were conducted. Once the footage of the interrogations was made public years later, it became clear how the children were led to make their outlandish statements. In one video, the psychologist asks one of the children, "What did you feel when we brought you back to that square?" "Joy," the girl responds. The psychologist asks, "Are you sure? Think about it, maybe it was another emotion." But the girl insists, "Joy." The psychologist adds, "Not a little bit of suffering too?" Eventually the child relents and nods at the psychologist's question. In another interview, it is clear the child is reading a script prepared for them. The child absent-mindedly discusses the cutting of throats and the drinking of blood before pausing and asking, "Is what I said okay?"
Quelle persone che mi facevano del male mi dicevano che esisteva il diavolo che era sottoterra, dovevamo per forza crederci, altrimenti Dopo ci becchiamo.
Pablo Trincia was inspired to expose this conspiracy by listening to the 2014 American crime podcast Serial. Trincia said, "After listening to it, a sound designer colleague of mine and I started looking for stories of Italian cold cases, and we discovered the story of a woman who had been acquitted after 16 years of the invented accusations of violence against her children. After talking with her, we realized that the story was much wider, that many more children had been taken away from their parents." Disturbingly, Trincia would go on to discover that cases of collective false memories being imposed on children was not a singular event, and similar stories cropped up in other parts of the world, including the United Kingdom. Other children have made baseless accusations against their parents and families. However, the Devils of Bassa Modenese was unique in execution, leading to the destruction of many families. One of the biggest questions you may be asking yourself is why? Why did the authorities intentionally manufacture stories of a murderous cult? From the evidence brought about by Veleno, it is clear that no such cult ever existed. It is believed that social workers concocted the cult stories as an excuse to remove the children from difficult, financially unstable families. Child Zero, later as an adult, reluctantly admitted to being coerced and manipulated by social workers. Interviewed in 2016, he claimed that his psychologist used him for her career, and that money played an integral motivation behind his adoption. Within the podcast, the families of the children and their lawyers expressed the belief that everything was done due to money. The incident in Bassa Modenese was not the first time such a thing had happened. The juvenile court of Veleno, which took the decision to take the children from their families, had been criticized for years for their methods. One judge by the name of Veleno left the court after 4 years, citing prejudice against people with difficult socio-economic backgrounds as his reason for leaving. Even if there was proof that the family was innocent, they would keep the child anyway, because, by law, they were not considered part of the family anymore due to the time it took to prove their innocence. Some of the judges were also working as directors of foster homes, which charged €400 a day per child. Regarding his research into the case, Trincia wrote in La Repubblica, "It was not easy, especially from a psychological point of view. Returning home after spending a day with mothers and fathers, crying for children they haven't seen for years, in the long run, risks leaving traces of emotions that you have to process and manage. Showing up at the door of their children, who grew up in other families, and now become adults trying to rebuild their lives, forgetting their parents and the dramas of the past, forces you to ask yourself 1,000 times if you are doing the right thing." Following the expose on the Devils of Bassa Modenese, many of those falsely accused were acquitted after new trials. However, some still remain to this day in prison for crimes they clearly did not commit. Although their names have been cleared thanks to the efforts of journalists such as Pablo Trincia, the damage that was done to these families can never be repaired. Decades have passed, the children have grown up, and nothing can turn back the clock.